Sahar, honoured to have you back here again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back here.
Sahar, you launched a new book called Switched On. It's a great, very catchy title. So, what does it mean, switched on?
Switched on, I suppose, to be obvious, is the opposite of being switched off.
Yeah.
Being switched on is a new mindset at work. It's the mindset that's not the traditional, what I call corporate employee mindset. It's a mindset of being open, not being complacent, not being stuck in a rut, being open to opportunities. In a way, switched on is a mindset about being more entrepreneurial in your work. So what I've tried to do with this book is translate everything I know about being an entrepreneur and translating that into habits for people that are not entrepreneurs, that actually sort of working in big organizations, established businesses. My first book's called Anyone Can Do It, and in fact my first chapter in Switched On is Anyone Can Do It, because I believe every single person has got switched on in them. Everyone can switch on. You've got it in you. You just have to sort of switch it on. Okay. So it's not at all a personality type. It's a skill that we have to hone that skill. It's right there. It's perhaps dormant. The sort of day-to-day routine work has made all those qualities within the kind of entrepreneurial qualities dormant. And being switched on is actually just about sort of turning the light on. That's already there.
Also, I suppose, as we're competing with China, and China didn't even have a term for work-life balance, so, if we're competing against that new reality, then you've got to make sure that you're always going to be your personality, yourself, so you ultimately, I guess, work harder.
And the thing is, I suppose someone like China is, they're sort of out of their comfort zone. They're people on the make now. And the danger with all of us in this world is we're in our comfort zone. And I find you're at your worst in your comfort zone. And we'll talk about that later, about the success trap, but that's really, you operate at your worst in your comfort zone, because in fact it sort of becomes this sort of prison that limits you. As the point about switched on is, once you leap out of your comfort zone, once you extend your comfort zone, then you actually operate at your best, because you then switch on. And we've all been there at times where you need to, you're just surprised you've got it in you. And switched on is a bit like that.
Yeah, because fundamentally, if you're outside of your comfort zone, you're doing new things, you're learning new things, and you get the adrenaline, the excitement, that everything goes with it. Absolutely,
and the energy. And switched on is about being, it's really no more than being alive in what you do. And it's amazing how consciously we get complacent and get into really autopilot habit. We sort of get into autopilot mode every day, going to the office. And switched on is just coming out of autopilot and being 100% genuinely yourself at work.
So, because I think a lot of people go to work and they literally get their compensation, right? They're compensated for doing something they don't particularly enjoy doing. But that's wrong, isn't it? You should really try to find something you love to do, even if you're in a large corporation, and do that. Is that?
Exactly. I mean, what I believe is life's too short to come in just for the paycheck.
Yeah.
Let's face it, we're working the best years of our lives most of our waking hours. So it's such a waste to just go in there almost seeing it as a punishment.
Yeah.
The whole sort of daily dross sort of thing.
Yeah.
And there's got to be much more to work. And I think work and life are much more linked nowadays. And ideally, you've got to do something that suits your personality.
Yeah.
Because you're working the best years of your life most of your waking hours.
That's right.
So what a waste to feel you're just doing it for the paycheck.
There was this, I think it's Confucius said, find a job you love and you'll never have to work another day in your life.
Exactly. That is exactly what I found. That's exactly what I found when I went down the entrepreneurship route and realized this whole idea that for people, work and life are opposite words. It's such a waste.
Yeah.
And when you do something you love, work and life are the same thing. So who's counting the hours, sort of thing?
Right.
Yeah. And that's the state I think everyone should be in, because everyone deserves that.
That's right. Yeah, we interviewed John Moulton, who's one of the top guys, as you know, in private equity, and he's probably richer than the Queen. Well, I don't know if he's richer than the Queen or not, but he doesn't need to work 19 hours a day, but he does because Warren Buffett doesn't go to work because he needs the money for his mortgage, for example.
Exactly. I mean, I've seen many interviews with entrepreneurs, and I remember one of them, I forget who it was, says, I work like people go to golf. It's my hobby.
Right.
And I think ideally, sometimes as well, if you could actually turn your hobby into your work, then it's a real win-win. So you've got to do something that you actually enjoy,
That's
as
right.
if it's not work.
Yeah, because you say actually in your book, you actually say work is about fulfillment, it's about engaging your mind and nourishing your soul. So you certainly agree with that. But that's probably there could be a lot of people watching this that it's a long way away from where they are. Lucky even if they like going to work, let alone that. So what advice would you give to somebody, maybe in a large corporation, that is wanting to get closer to that ideal?
What I believe is we all know what we're good at. We all know there's something that we do well. And I think the way you find out what you're good at is normally what you enjoy. So
That's right.
what you enjoy doing, it actually is a pretty good indication of what you're good at, because there's a close correlation between what you enjoy doing and how good you are at doing it. So I think for those people, it's just about going back to sort of enjoyment of work. And once you're back somewhere you're enjoying it, by definition, you'll be performing better. You'll be performing at a much higher level. So my point is, even for people who say, you know what, I just want a 9 to 5, even that 9 to 5 is a waste. If you're not using what Ricardo Semler of Maverick calls your reservoir of talent. We all have a reservoir, and it's just sitting there. And to go to work every day not using this reservoir is just a complete waste. And you hate what you do, you're bored by what you do when you're not tapping into your reservoir.
Absolutely. So find something you love to do means you're most likely going to be good at it, except for I love singing, but I'm so tone deaf, it's a disaster.
But what you do is presenting, in a way. So presenting is not a million miles away.
That's a good point.
You're projecting your voice, you come across... So it's sort of closer to where no one gets that ideal, but it's just gravitating to areas where, sort of you're more comfortable. It's just your sort of home territory in a way.
Yeah, because it's one of the things I really liked about your book is that I was expecting when you sort of say switched on, you were automatically going to say you should leave the corporation and set up, a chocolate muffin business or whatever you wanted to do. But that's not what you're saying, is it? You can actually be switched on in a large corporation. So tell us about that. How should you find something you love to do but in a large corporate?
Well, I mean, the reason why, first I'll tell you, Anthony, the reason why I wrote the book was my first book, Anyone Can Do It. I would go, and I still do, what I love doing at the moment. My sort of main day job is I go to big companies and I talk about entrepreneurship and about behaving entrepreneurially. And what I found was after every speech, people would come up to me in very quite senior positions in these great jobs and say, oh gosh, I love hearing, about how much passion you have. I've got a dream, I want to leave and start my own muffin business or, whatever, a sort of oxygen bar. And I'd be thinking to myself, gosh, these people, they're sitting there in these amazing jobs, their salary paid in this big, wonderful company with so much opportunity. And they're sitting there dreaming at this sort of light at the end of the tunnel of one day leaving and starting by them, their own business. And actually, I realized there's sort of an untapped opportunity, because in a way they're thinking of this sort of fantasy of entrepreneurship. And we've had that for a while. There's been a lot of articles on entrepreneurship, a lot of TV programs. We've all put entrepreneurs on a pedestal. But actually, there's a lot of entrepreneurial behavior in these large organizations. And so what I want to tell these people, for God's sake, keep that job, stay there. Don't leave that job, but just make it fun for yourself. Rekindle, reignite that passion you had at the beginning, because it's such a pity to sort of, especially as you get older, it's much more difficult to leave and start up again. And it's not ideal, entrepreneurship. It's not a great solution if you've got financial responsibilities. Yeah.
So it's about getting switched on in a large corporate. And I know we're going to go into some of the habits that you talk about, but sort of, going forward, putting your hand up, going for responsibilities, setting up new projects, all this type of stuff is the way that you can actually do it in the workplace. You don't have to leave and set your own business up, because I think a lot of people think that you've got to move vertically, whereas if you move maybe laterally as well, you get more experience in different sectors. It's a good thing for you as you rise up in the organisation to have experience in marketing, finance, operations.
Well, more problem with rising up often, which people find, is you get promoted, but you get promoted to an area where you don't enjoy it anymore. So say you're a people person and you're in a customer-facing people job. Very often people get promoted so they never see customers, they never see the product. They're just, then they have this sort of a job whereby they don't have that interface anymore. And the reason they joined was because of that interface they had with the customer. And so sometimes you can get promoted, the wrong way. So it's about reassessing that with an open mind and thinking, it's not about leaving this job, it's not about the solution is to start up on my own. There is a solution, let me make this work for me. So that I love what I do, I'm enjoying it, I'm good at it. And that's the sort of balance. And I think that balance can be chats with colleagues, chats with your boss, trying to rejig around your responsibilities, getting you closer to whichever area you like doing more. If you're a numbers person, if you're promoted, you never do numbers anymore, you probably miss numbers.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that turns you on, it's getting back into that.
Okay, so aligning your responsibility with your personality, your passion, and everything else. Yeah, because I've seen a lot of salespeople that love being on the phone, selling and answering needs for customers, and they get promoted to management. They don't nowhere near that, and they become an administrator, and they hate it.
Exactly, they hate it, and they start switching off because they've actually lost the lifeblood of why they joined that business in the first place. Yeah. And I think I would sort of say people, the reason why they apply to that job, everyone's very excited when you first apply, you go for the interview, you get the job offer. So what happens down the line? Why is it that we lose that sort of click? Yeah. We lose that magic.
Absolutely. So it's a great book. It's a great idea. So if we can talk about one of the habits now, which is putting yourself in the shoes of your customer, which I think is a great one. First of all, if we can just start on a macro, what do you mean about putting yourself in the shoes of the customer, and why is that so important?
Putting yourself in the shoes of the customer is basically what I realize, and just going back again from where my experience comes from, is as an entrepreneur, you start businesses because you are the customer. Yeah. So I wanted skinny lattes. I started Coffee Republic. Then I wanted sugar-free candy, so I started Skinny Candy. So it's very much very much your own customer, and this is the same with other entrepreneurs. The king of shaves, guy Will King, started it because he had some allergy shaving. Whatever it is, there's always that sort of personal unmet need. And what I found is with working with larger companies is as you get larger, you lose that touch with the customer. So people often work in companies and they don't really relate to the customer at all. They forget why they're doing it, who the customer is. In the words of Jack Welch, in a way, you're sort of facing your boss and your behind is your customer. And so getting into your customer's shoes is sort of almost bringing meaning back to life and really sort of having empathy, genuine empathy for the customer.
You mentioned this point in your book. As you get bigger, you get further and further away from the customer, potentially, and you get more inward focused. I had a friend of mine who's marketing director of a company, and I asked him, when was the last time you spoke to the market? And it wasn't for 4 years. But market is in the word marketing director. So it's about getting, as you said, getting back to the customer and putting yourself in.
Exactly, because I think the customer, the product is where the fun's at. Yeah. And it's where you've often joined because they're passionate about whatever product it is they sell. And I think when you start losing touch with the customer, you forget why is it you're doing stuff. And the customer becomes this sort of market segment. They almost become this sort of body of people on paper, this sort of behavioral segment of these people you're analyzing. And that's so boring. But when you get back in touch with the customer, it just makes your job so much more exciting because you then get intuitive, you then get creative. Yeah. You just look at it from another perspective.
Yeah, because you point out in your book as well about Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, who talks about being obsessed by customers. And I watched a video on YouTube where he's talking about that specifically, and he's ranting and raving about it. So, I think a lot of people put too much focus on their competitors and look in the wing mirror as opposed to focusing on the customer and where you're going as a company.
Exactly, me too. I enjoyed watching the video of Jeff Bezos going that sort of, we obsess over our customers. Because I think all successful companies do. And, everyone says, everyone pays a lip service to passion for customers, we love our customer is king. But the amount of companies actually mean it, there's a big difference. And you can't really mean it if, you're just worshipping at the altar of some imaginary customer that's a cardboard cutout.
You talk about what you can or what you can't expect from customers. You shouldn't expect for them to do the innovation for you, correct? I mean, that's a responsibility mostly for in-house that you should think about what you should innovate on behalf of your customers.
Exactly. I mean, which is why I remember when I was starting Coffee Republic, people said, have you asked people if they want skinny lattes or cappuccinos? And I'm sure if I'd done a survey and say, would you like sort of half calf, decaf, skinny lattes, people would have said, no, I quite like black or white coffee. So the point is, it's in the words of Yves Saint Laurent, the fashion designer, marketing is giving people things they never even knew they wanted. Yeah. I mention a lot, as I'm sure you see in my book, the story of the Post-it note, which is, I suppose a fairly well-used story of kind of entrepreneurship within 3M. Yeah. But what's interesting about the Post-it notes is when they did a market survey, they asked customers' reaction to the Post-it note was, well, why on earth should we need a Post-it note when you've got paper clips, sort of and sort of bulldog clips. Why on earth have a Post-it note? So people can't really anticipate what you're about to give them. So the same way when I did Coffee Republic, people just were black and white coffee.
Yeah.
It's the same with a Post-it. It's up to you to actually anticipate a future need they don't even know they have yet.
That's right.
And that's the excitement, and that's what makes you switched on, because I think once you're actually in your customer's shoes, that's where ideas come to you. When you're reading the same report that all your competitors have read, you're not going to get any new insights, because you're all reading the same report, you've all got the same data of information. But it's once you're out there in the coalface, queuing up, getting the service, good or bad, that you start getting the ideas. You start getting that kind of irritants. And a lot of innovation, I suppose, is solving a problem, is removing an irritant. And that's the point. So innovation is really up to you rather than asking customers.
Yeah.
And there's this great actually quote, which I've got in my book, that from an article that Steve Jobs did in Fortune, that the point of coming up with iTunes wasn't that they did a survey and people said they want music. The whole iTunes team themselves were great music fans, and they wanted to carry their music library around with them. So they didn't spend a fortune asking people whether or not they would want that. They figured that they wanted it. There were about 20 of them. So they went through the logistics thinking, well, if we want it, and if it can come at this price, at this rate, then most likely others would want it as well. And that's how most entrepreneurial minds think.
Absolutely. So I suppose going back to being switched on in large corporates, individuals can take responsibility for actually going out, acting themselves as customers, come up with ideas, take it back, and be the flagship person responsible for that project in the organisation. That's how you can get excitement.
Exactly, because a part of being switched on is actually being innovative, because being switched on is about, rather than doing the same thing you did every day, it's about moving with the times. It's about coming up with new ideas, making them happen. It's the excitement of moving with the times, being of the moment in a way. And I think putting yourself in the customer's shoes is the best way you're going to get creative. I mean, you almost can't help being creative once you're out there, treating customers as human beings. And sometimes people forget to treat them as human beings like themselves. I think the more you relate to them on a personal level and you try to connect with them, if you have got contact, the more powerful I think that connection can be. And people very much put on a sort of work face when they're with their customer. And they somehow don't treat them as if they would treat people in normal life. So putting yourself in customer shoes is as much as possible being real, seeing customers in real time, in real life, and them seeing the same you that your friends see in a way.
Well, we talked about a lot about getting employees or yourself in the shoes of your customers, but is there any organisation that you know that really encourages employees to actually do that?
Yes, I think there's a lot of stories of organisations that do that. I know, for example, at Dyson, I suppose James Dyson must have stipulated that everyone that works at whatever level of Dyson has to try their hand at actually putting together one of their vacuum cleaners to get an idea, because there's no way you can work at Dyson and have no idea what this product is.
Yeah.
But the same at hotel chains, apparently Four Seasons, everyone that works there, from the kitchen staff to the bellboy, whoever, they also will be able to stay as a guest at a Four Seasons.
Okay.
With someone they take and genuinely have the guest experience. And that gives them a completely different perspective, and I think a different perspective on the brand. It's the same with pharmaceutical companies. I mentioned this guy, Bill George, that wrote this great book, Authentic Leadership. When he was running Medtronics, the pharmaceutical company, he would get people who've used the company's pacemakers to come in and tell their stories. And I find that's very effective in pharmaceutical companies, if you can actually relate to what a difference you're making in people's lives.
That's right.
How much more emotional and emotive that will make what you do.
Because it puts your job, if you're in a back office function, in context to the customer, which is all important.
Absolutely, as to why you do this. And you relate to it much more, and you feel you're playing your part in helping someone.
You make a great point about diversity as well. I think so many people just go out for lunch with the same people, with Agnes every day, and then they buy the same things every single week to read. It's about sort of, I guess, mixing it up as much as you can to then have that open mindset.
Exactly, and that's actually the second habit, the getting out of the office.
Yeah.
Which is, I read this actually in this great book by the What If Group, and they said the quality of the stimulus in results in what comes out.
Yeah.
So in a way, we can't really control what comes out. We control what we put in.
Yeah.
And providing you're getting enough fresh stuff in, you will get creative. What comes out by definition, the sort of the byproduct of all the stuff in your brain will process it and make you creative. So the point of habit 2 is, in order to kind of hone your creativity and activate your creative skills, you've got to be out there getting all this fresh information, all this stimulus in.
Another great thing you say as well is about sort of, how your average office doesn't exactly inspire you unless it's probably a Google office. But you talk about sort of getting out of your mundane cubicle.
You're trying to be creative in the office. It's very difficult. And trying to imagine and visualize your customer and putting them at the forefront of your life. Whereas you've got to be out there where the customer is.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem with being stuck in the office is the whole bureaucracy. I mean, there's this one statistic that the average office worker gets interrupted every 3 minutes by a phone call or an email. And of these 3 minutes, it takes us another 8 minutes to actually go back to what we were doing.
Yeah.
And so that is just part and parcel of normal office life. And that's how we just go there, do routine work, do the same thing we do every day, sort of deal with all this stuff that's actually urgent but not really important, and never have time to do the really important stuff, and get out there where the customer is, where we can put ourselves in customer shoes, get ideas, come back, make them happen.
So another habit you talk about, which is really fascinating, is about the habit of being clueless. And I know some people that are masters at being clueless, but what do you mean by that from a sort of a beneficial perspective of being in an organisation?
What I mean by that, yet again going back to the entrepreneur's analogy, is when I started Coffee Republic, my first business, I was clueless. I was clueless about coffee, clueless about retail, clueless about catering. So both Bobby and I were clueless about this business we're going to go into.
Yeah.
And you would sort of think that was a disadvantage. But I actually learned later on that was a big advantage that we were clueless. Because in a way, our mind was uncontaminated by this is how they've always done it. Was contaminated by someone tried it, it didn't work. So all we had was this vision of this coffee bar in front of our eyes, without any obstacles. We were blissfully, naively ignorant of all the obstacles. So we just went and made it happen. Yeah. But the problem with people who already were in these bigger coffee companies was, they could see 1,000,001 reasons why it wouldn't work. They probably suggested to someone said, someone tried it, doesn't work. Someone said, this is not how we do things. Yeah. What we do works, why change it? And so that's exactly the same analogy in people working in larger companies. Because to an extent, their success, their experience becomes their straitjacket. So every time they want to do something new, there's always this is how we've always done a mentality, which stops you ever doing anything new. Yeah. So you get restricted, you get constrained by this is how we do it around here. This is how things are done. Yeah. So you never, that just keeps you there. It sort of imprisons you. Yeah. And you never find a new way of doing things.
If Rose in the accounts department did something in 1974, it didn't work, it then goes into the corporate manual, it becomes the Bible for the psyche of the organisation. So really look at the beliefs around you and challenge those beliefs.
Exactly. I mean, there's this great saying from Henry Ford, the car maker. Apparently he was trying to make the conveyor belt go faster. Yeah. And the guys on the conveyor belt said to him, sorry, Mr. Ford, we've been on this conveyor belt for 30, 40 years, and believe us, we've tried it, this conveyor belt cannot go any faster. And his reaction, Henry Ford's reaction was, okay, then go and find me some 19-year-old who's got no idea this can't go any faster. Yeah. Because the 19-year-old can then make it happen. And that is exactly that scenario, I think. Is that you just need to use, and if you can't, you're not going to sort of fire yourself. You just have to forget about what you know and just make sure that you're wiping the slate clean. And, you're not supposed to know what you find, so you come across new things. Yeah. Just having an open mind. Yeah.
It's exactly what Tom Peters, because we interviewed Tom Peters, and it's exactly what he was saying. Hire those obnoxious people that are going to be aggressive and tell you that you're wrong in everything that you do, because you want to hire those people to challenge all your beliefs internally.
Exactly.
A lot of hiring managers, I think, I'm not hiring that person because it'd be a nightmare to manage. Whereas it sort of goes against as you said, you've got to get those people in the organisation to challenge the beliefs. If you can't, then you'll hire somebody.
Exactly. And I mean, just, you sort of people hire people who fit in. And when you fit in, you obviously have all, and what's interesting for me, coming from the outside is, as we got bigger in both businesses I started, you then hire people who've actually almost had the same CV, have sort of been in equivalent companies. And so they've all had the same experience. Yeah. And so no one's got that outside perspective. Yeah. And for me, the only outside perspective to have is from the inside out, the customer's perspective. So everyone's sort of stuck reading the same reports, reading the same sort of conventional practices. And so no one ever comes across new ways of doing things. And it's interesting, I just was doing the research in my book, I realized some Nobel Prize winners, they actually kind of stop their students. They actually tell them off if they're reading kind of industry practice, because that's no way are they going to invent anything new. Just by forgetting about all that is how they're going to stumble across new things.
Sahar, you talk about the success trap as well. So what's the success trap?
Success trap is something we all have. You know, I think as Bill Gates said, sort of failure makes heroes, but success makes monsters. The success trap is somewhere we all go to where things work, and you know, if it ain't broke, why fix it? Is a sort of success trap. So why on earth change the status quo when it's working perfectly?
Right.
But the danger of that is if you don't, then it makes you complacent.
Yeah.
And I find in life we all go through these periods where we have a real productivity, we're seeking, you know, starting from nothing. We make it there and then we plateau because you're successful, and then you get complacent, and then you realize the complacency is not going to work for you. So you kind of give it another big burst of energy.
Yeah.
And so that's what the success trap is. It's just almost thinking you're in some sort of a comfort zone, that you're in a good place, and not realizing actually it's a bit sort of who moved my cheese slightly, the success trap as well.
Yeah. Because I suppose the more successful you are, the more defensive. You sort of hold on to that with a kung fu grip, and that success, and you become defensive as opposed to offensive.
Exactly. Yeah. You can just you don't need to strive that hard anymore. You lose that hunger. You get heavy, and I found that very much in my own life. And I think success is a very bad teacher in a way, and you just always want to keep that agility and looking around and innovating and risking. And you know, great companies that constantly do that and put their neck out, although they don't need to technically, are the ones that stay alive, basically.
Simon Calver, from CEO of Love Film, we interviewed, he was saying that, you know, he's number one obviously in his industry space, but he's always wanting to look at how to cannibalize himself, because if he's not, then his competitors will be.
Absolutely.
So never being complacent, always pushing for the next product that you, as you said, innovating on behalf of your customer, coming up with the next product for them.
Exactly, because I mean, obviously, and especially in this world, it's such a cliche, but what works for you now is not going to work for you tomorrow. And it's just so easy to assume that works for you now will just continue working for you every day. And I wish it was so, but it's not. So, so I think kind of my point is, if you're switched on, you're constantly thinking ahead.
You also mentioned about the habit of prototyping, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs know you've got to build a prototype to make sure it works. You then go to the VCs, you show them historical things that have worked, and then you scale up once you've actually proven a prototype. But prototyping in large organizations, it can be done as well. So what's your point there? How can you prototype in a large corporate?
My point about prototyping in large corporate is the culture doesn't exist as much. As you say, people have ideas. The way they primarily sort of communicate their ideas is through PowerPoint presentations. Let's have a meeting. And the problem with PowerPoint presentations is the idea stays between your two ears, which is basically the most fragile place it can ever be. And people just look at a PowerPoint, it doesn't mean anything to them, it doesn't resonate with them. And what I see entrepreneurs do is, because they're kitchen table, very blue beta, they always put a quick mock-up of whatever they've got. And once you can see the mock-up, once you can feel it, it gives you a real sort of hands-on feel for what the product is. It starts kind of happening once you've got the real thing in front of you, rather than just a theory of it written in, you know, font 12 Tahoma sort of thing. It just doesn't resonate at all. And prototyping is a culture which I think in larger organizations it's got to come back. And it's a bit foolish prototyping, to be honest, because I mean, there's a sort of the stories of James Dyson coming out with his first prototypes with the loo paper sort of hold, you know, the roll of the loo paper, using that as the cyclone, as the yes, exactly, as a tube for the cyclone. And I'm sure it looks pretty ridiculous. And the problem is, in a big company, people will probably be sort of laughing at that. But that's how innovators get things done. So prototyping, as if very Blue Peter style, putting stuff together. Bit of sticky tape, a bit of improvisation, hands-on playing, and that playing is fun, and it sort of goes back to being switched on again, because once you start feeding stuff and making stuff, it actually activates that sort of part of the creative part of your brain, the sort of play part of your brain, that you need to be switched on, because you need that element of play in this working life.
Got it. Yes, because I think a lot of people might be embarrassed of coming up with some sort of, foam prototype for what they're wanting to create. But as you say in your book, anything worth doing is worth doing badly to begin with.
And then anything worth doing badly motto just never really works in big companies because people are always scared of doing something badly.
Yeah.
They never want to stick their head above the parapet, which I think, but they should. And the great thing about a prototype is that it's sort of hands-on problem solving. Once you've got the prototype on your desk, it could be a really imperfect prototype, but by seeing it, you know how to improve it.
That's right.
But by trying to visualize it in your mind and trying to write it out and explain that to someone, you can't improve it. You'll never get buy-in for it. So I always recommend in any way you can. And I think it's a service business. You can prototype by role-playing.
Right.
Act it out. Just do a small version of it.
Yeah.
I very much find often people try to take too big a chunk. They think of all the elements. Whereas my entrepreneurial kitchen table approach is just get something together.
Yeah.
I mean, when I did my sweets business, Anthony, I remember, the first packets we literally got was, sort of cutting up something, doing it on my kitchen scales, doing labels on my printer, sticking it. It looked horrible, but it gave me a really good feel for what it was.
Yeah.
And a big sort of sounding board to improve it and to get the real product. And once it's tangible, it sort of starts happening. It's no longer an inertia.
And then I suppose you can take it from internal to then trying it on a pool of customers, real customers, and then trial and error, and if it works, you expand it. You don't have to put a £10 million marketing budget behind every product to begin with.
Exactly. I mean, let me give you a great example of prototyping. I was trying to get you to visualize a product.
Okay.
It's repositionable. It's a work aid. It's bright yellow. And it's sort of really handy for ideas.
Yeah.
Difficult to describe, repositionable, sort of handy for ideas, movable.
Sounds very conceptual, don't like it.
But if I showed you the Post-it note, if I put the Post-it note on your desk, you would know exactly what that was. And this is a great example. Again, I use Art Fry of 3M that invented the Post-it note. But he tried to explain to people what it was. The marketing department rejected it. They did a survey. People said, no, we don't want this. So his solution was actually he came up with prototypes. And one night, when everyone had gone home, he made up prototypes, these little stacks of Post-it notes, and he left them on people's desks. So the following day when they arrived, people started using the Post-it notes.
Right.
And of course, they were hooked because they could see what it was.
Yeah.
But trying to describe in words or even a presentation what a Post-it note is, it's just near impossible. And that's exactly the benefit of prototyping. It's sort of hands-on, let me show you what I mean, get a feel for it, real-life approach to work.
Yeah. Because also a lot of learners are kinesthetic as opposed to auditory or visual, so they actually want to touch it to actually get the buy-in. And a lot of people are like that, so I think that's absolutely spot on.
Yes, exactly.
It's similar, I think, also you sort of talking about going to not the kitchen table, but a boardroom table in a large organisation and doing something like this. It's closely aligned, isn't it, to bootstrapping, your concept of bootstrapping. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what bootstrapping is and the Sahar Hashemi's definition of that.
Bootstrapping is basically the point you get often in bigger organisations is whenever they want to do something, people have brilliant ideas. Because I used to think people in large organisations, maybe the ideas weren't that great, but they could implement anything they wanted.
Yeah.
Whereas it was actually just the reverse. People in large companies have brilliant ideas, but they can never make it happen because every time they want to make it happen, they want to do it on a big scale. They don't have budget. They try to get permission. It gets stuck. So it sort of gets stuck in the corporate traffic jams. And that's very frustrating. So if you're in a switched on state, great to have the ideas, great you prototype a bit. But when you actually want to try it out, you can't try it out. So bootstrapping is some sort of a guerrilla way of getting what you want done, doing it under the radar. So you don't have to ask for permission. It doesn't trigger some authorization where you have to get a huge budget.
Right.
You try to do it with the lowest, with anything you've got, sort of somehow making 2 + 2 = 5. And entrepreneurs bootstrap the whole time. Entrepreneurs often, you hear them making their own creams in the kitchen or whatever it is, but they just sort of somehow get it done, get the job done, get the first one out, start selling it, and then they improve. But we don't have this culture in larger organizations. And so bootstrapping culture is almost by hook or by crook. That doesn't sort of seem right, but it is. You have to get things done, and it's a bit imperfect, but you somehow make 2 + 2 = 5.
All of these habits that you're talking about, these are sort of not in the job description. but they're the
Yeah.
extra 10% that are going to be a huge difference, get your name out there in your company, in your marketplace as being well known, and that will then rise you to the top. As a result, you get rewarded, feedback, money, and success, and it doesn't have to be in your muffin business as an entrepreneur, lone wolf entrepreneur.
That's what we miss from what I'm just saying, bootstrapping, is people bootstrap the whole time on a Sunday, in their garden.
Yeah.
You bootstrap when you got people coming around for barbecue. You're bootstrapping in everyday life when your child has to go to a fancy dress. You're bootstrapping in everyday life, but you don't use those same everyday life skills at work because, very much our dad's generation was you put the work face on. You put the sort of work personality on.
Absolutely.
And I think the point of switched on is actually use who you are at home at the office. So therefore, it's the point about being 100% yourself.
Absolutely.
Because all that amazing creativity you've got when there's something or you're doing handiwork at home, what about bringing that same persona to the office?
Absolutely. Yeah, because if you have to change your personality for 10 hours a day, that's quite tiring. And having to walk, you should find a job that actually is congruent with your personality, then you're in natural flow, I guess.
Exactly. It's tiring and it's boring as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sahar, you talk about the habit of notching up no's, which I get a lot of no's all the time. But can you tell me, I think a lot of people are afraid of getting no's, and that actually is exceedingly damaging for their own individual life success, but also their careers. So tell us about why you actually dedicate a whole chapter of your book to notching up no's. What's your point you're making there?
The point I'm making there is when you hear stories of entrepreneurs, there's always there are these stories of how many rejections they had, from Walt Disney to Kentucky Fried Chicken to even Paul McCartney being rejected by the school choir.
Yeah.
So the people we hear about, there's almost kind of swashbuckling kind of famous names of business we hear about. We hear about their stories of getting a no. But somehow when it comes to ourselves in a big company, we get the first yes when we get the job accepted and we get the job offer. And then a no is almost taboo in a larger organization, I found. You're almost not meant to ever ask someone and get a no. And therefore, this idea that you want to avoid a no makes you complacent because you prefer to play it safe, not push the boat out.
Yeah.
As long as you never hear the word no. And that makes you complacent and makes you switch off. So my point is actually, when you are doing something differently, you're always going to get a no. Because there's a status quo bias. People love the status quo. And as a gut reaction, we reject new things.
Yeah.
And you've got to accept that no one's ever suggested anything new and people have gone, wow. People have always rejected new things, labeled those people insane, whatever it is. People have always rejected the new.
Yeah.
It's the sort of shock of the new in a way. And so if you factor that in, then you change your approach.
Yeah.
That it's not going to be an easy ride. And sometimes I think people in larger companies, you sort of expect the easy ride. Entrepreneurship is meant to be difficult. Larger corporations, easy. Make things sort of pass through. No, why can't you have the same?
So if you do get a no, would your advice be just to be persistent?
Yes.
Just like you have to in any sales job or any entrepreneur around the world, even internally in a large corporate, you get a no, be persistent, keep on going. It's your vision, it's your dream, and it's going to get you switched on. So keep on fighting, get more no's, but you'll eventually get a yes.
Exactly. My formula is of the 20 times you ask, you're going to notch up on 19 no's, which really is from my own experience, where we got 19 no's from bank managers for a loan from Coffee Republic, and the 20th one said yes. So that's what I use, is almost try to notch up on 19 no's. We got only 19 no's. I think the guy from Starbucks got 400 something. So it's all relative, and therefore the idea is when you're getting no's, when you're getting rejected, you're in a good place because you're out of your comfort zone. You're pushing the boat out. You're doing something new, and eventually you are going to get the yes. And I use that in my own life. And I think great CEOs we read about are CEOs that encourage mistakes, because without a bit of trial and error, it's not even a mistake, it's a bit of trial and error, you're not going to get things right first time round. You're never going to get to where you want to.
That's right.
You're just going to keep doing the same thing.
Yeah. There was a sales director in New York that I was trying to headhunt for absolutely ages. I eventually got him into our organisation, and at 8:10 on his first morning, he was jumping up and down, celebrating. So I was like, this is the fastest sale in the history of our organisation. So I went over and I said, congratulations, he actually got a rejection, not a yes, but he knew he knew what his conversion rate was. So every single time he got rejected, he knew he was getting closer to that yes. So
Exactly.
It's about sort of not seeing it as rejection, not seeing it as failure, but as a trial, and then you're getting closer
exactly.
to your...
And that is exactly my formula as well. If I ever do something, but even publishing a book, the more I get no's, the closer I know I'm going to go through the process.
Yeah.
And I almost believe it so strongly. If I get a yes the first time round, I sort of get very suspicious because I know I'm going to pay for it eventually.
Sahar, thanks for that, because you've covered a lot in your book, but it's a fantastic book, and I'd encourage people to go out and read it. But there's other areas that you're passionate about that's not in the book. For example, women in business and diversity. So can you just tell us what some of your thoughts in those two areas?
Well, and what I always say about it, people always ask me whether or not I found there was any difference being especially compared to my brother when we started Coffee Republic, whether being a woman was a disadvantage in any way. And I just get always outraged by this question because I find in this generation we live in, it's almost a preposterous question, really, to have any issues of any difference in gender. And I always feel I owe it to the women who came before us, the generations before, who've actually paved the way and have made my life so easy, that it's actually not about gender. And I think if I've ever failed in my life or had any shortcomings, it's because of my own personal shortcomings, completely regardless of my gender.
Yeah.
So I find that those sort of topics about sort of equality as such bore me completely. And I find in this world, it's the essence of diversity is not about equality in a way. It's about diversity is about everyone being able to be themselves. So even if you're white male, it's important that you're actually truly able to be yourself rather than someone's cookie cutter version of what you should be. And so really diversity is about everyone bringing 100% of themselves to work. And in women in this scenario, being 100% true to themselves and realizing that actually as women we define success differently than men. I think we work differently. We've got other different priorities. And therefore it's about bringing all those and sort of kind of putting them all in one package and making it work for us.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think any culture or organisation that doesn't just focus on meritocracy, in other words, it doesn't matter what race, what colour, whatever, anything you are, as long as you're good at the job, that's the only...
Exactly. I think even, actually the impression I get is nowadays it's even gone beyond that, whereas our dad's generations were probably, everyone sort of had to be, very much fit in. Everyone was the same, the whole thing, I think, before even sort of, it's almost a uniformity fostered productivity before. But now, actually, realizing uniformity doesn't foster productivity, you need people to be truly themselves and bring all of themselves. Yeah. So I'm thinking in this new world, where I've kind of written my book, they need to be more than just uniform. They need to be 100% yourself. Bring your head, heart, and mind to work, basically. And just fully use yourself so you're fully switched on in what you do. And you're at your best.
You've been out of Coffee Republic now since 2001. Since then, it's obviously been through its fair share of troubles, ups and downs and that type of thing. Is there anything that we, as business people or leaders of business, can learn from the troubles, ups and downs of Coffee Republic since you and Bobby left?
For me, really, my own lessons are really just the personal lessons I've learned, I must say, Anthony. It just, I wish I'd never left Coffee Republic. I thought it was a business we'd started, we had a lot of passion towards it. And it still needs the entrepreneurs because it's a very competitive business out there. And I wish it still had people that were genuinely passionate about it, running it, making sure it just stays on top, stays unique, has what was special about it at the beginning. So my only lessons there are really the personal lessons I've learned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's a tendency, isn't it, for the acquiring company just to basically just take over and let the entrepreneur go. But would you say there's a strong case for keeping the entrepreneurial passion and vision in the business even after the acquisition?
Yes, I think so. I think the lucky company is the one that actually, yes, you might have a new team, but that team, the sort of person running that team, the new, let's say, CEO, so to speak, would actually want to keep the entrepreneurs close. Because I think, once you start a business, you've got this sort of somehow, some sort of connection, sort of emotional connection with the business.
Yeah.
And you're quite intuitive about the business and therefore very useful to someone else coming in. And someone who doesn't realize that, I think, is losing a lot, which is how we come, you see so many from the Pret a Manger founder to Michael Dell to even Howard Schultz of Starbucks all going back to the businesses they started.
That's right. Talking about going back, is that something that you or Bobby are wanting to do?
It's been too long a process for me leaving it, actually.
Okay.
I think the initial leaving it and the sort of divorce from it was far too painful to go back now.
Right. Okay,
yes,
fine.
I think it's too late now.
Yeah. Sahar, thank you very much indeed for your time today. It's been really great insight into your fabulous book. Thank you again. Really great to have you here.
Thank you, Anthony.